Welcome back. We continue to feature these 7 leading Toronto mayoral candidates on the show for one-on-one interviews all week long. First up this morning, we hear from former MP Olivia Chow. Good morning, Olivia. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Tammie.
We'll start off with the fact that you have been leading in every single poll that has come out consistently and by double digits. So when you see that, do you, I guess in the end, why do you think you've resonated so well with Torontonians who are being polled and who say that they will vote for you, and they have been saying this for weeks now?
I think people are a bit anxious about how expensive life has become. There's ordinary folks, whether you're senior, not being able to retire because you have to work to make sure you can get your rent pay, or young families that are saying, where am I going to move to? I just have a baby. Renting is so expensive. So if you have a house, you're okay, but the mortgage, because the interest rate is going up too, right? It's not, the standard of living has gone higher and higher. And partially because the city haven't built any housing for so long, the housing market is very unbalanced. As a result, people are paying such high rent. So I think people, my message of let's make life a bit more affordable by building more affordable housing, it's connecting with people because people are anxious about it.
Right. And I'll go to the housing issue and property taxes. You've been a target by your fellow candidates for weeks now as well. And the big criticism is the fact that you won't be specific when it comes to property tax increase and how much you plan to increase property taxes. Other candidates have said they're going to keep it either below or at the rate of inflation. They've given some kind of estimate. Why won't you give an estimate to Torontonians?
Well, first, I think it's important to have a budget that puts people first, right? What are taxes? Taxes is really a budget and how much money you have to put the services for people. So I think it's important to talk to people to say, what are your priorities? Once we have that, a people first process, which we haven't done for 10 years. And if you look at the way the budgeting works now, we end up having a $1.5 billion budget deficit. Wow, never seen that before, right? TDC are cutting services. There's no housing that is affordable, right? So it doesn't quite work that way, how it's been done in the past. So we need to change the approach. Now, once you have the people first approach, then you have the budget, then you look at where the money coming from. I'm very specific and say, hey, those people that are buying pretty expensive houses, $3 to $5, $10 or $20 million with private squash courts, they can pay a bit more when they're buying this new house because they can afford it. Now we're talking about only 2% of everybody is buying houses. I don't think it's, I don't know about you, but I don't know a lot of people that can afford that kind of homes. So they can pay a bit more. And then land speculator that evict everybody, have the homes, have the housing vacant, they can pay a bit more in the vacancy tax. After all that, we negotiate with the federal and provincial government and say, hey, come help us out. Then we will have a property tax, modest increase. And I'm from an immigrant family. Life was hard when we were growing up, when I was growing up. Every penny counts. I'm not extravagant. So I'm not going to go extravagant and raise everybody's tax so high. The whole thing is making life affordable. If I raise the tax so high people can't afford it, what's the point?
But then how do you pay for those things like that budget gap as well as the new services and reversing transit cuts then?
Well, there are different revenue tools that the city staff is coming up. And we, as I just mentioned two, I think there are other ones. So, but at the end of the day, we still have to get the provincial and the federal government to come in and help. Look at all these refugees. They see Canada as a source of hope, safety, They arrive here, it's their dream, they land in Canada, and they're sleeping on the street. These are refugees, a lot of them from war-torn country, and there's no room for them. But these shelters, really, since refugees are a federal issue, really the federal government needs to bear some responsibility. I'm sure they will, but the negotiation takes time, and I'm sure they would pay something.
Right.
Because right now, the poor refugees, you see it, it's on the street. That's not a welcoming place.
Yeah.
For people leaving, like Afghanistan, leaving Taliban,
Right.
leaving Uganda, and all those places that are not that safe.
Well, we're going to take a look at safety now. We have a viewer question as well that we got a Facebook comment from a viewer named Debbie who asks you, we have seen an increase in violent crime that has caused citizens and visitors to feel less safe in our city. As mayor, what is your plan to deal with both the real and perceived safety concerns?
It's a great question. I walk everywhere. I understand the unease. And if you look at sometimes what's happening is there are folks that when you call 911, the police are telling you that almost half of those calls are not policing calls. A good number of them are people that have mental health crisis or opioid overdose crisis. If they have mental health crisis, for example, let's send the expert that are trained to deal with mental health. Let's get the right people to help the right people. That would free up the police to do the policing work. Because when you call 911, right now, some of those calls really should go to 211, which is the mental health folks. So I'm going to put more money on the mental health side of things so that the community crisis team, very well-trained people, can deal with that.
Will you take money away from Toronto Police?
Well, there will be some shifting between, but the money really is dealing with some of the 911 calls.
Right.
That would free up the 911. Then you don't have to wait so long.
Because there's been concern about defunding the police, and that's been mentioned so much. Will you be taking money from the police budget and putting it elsewhere?
Well, we may be able to transform some of those policing calls to mental health calls. Some of it are in policing stream already, some of them are not. So that kind of transformation may take place. I'm definitely not defunding the police. The police have had, since 2015, 23% increase in their budget, right? So even just a few months ago in March, they had a big budget increase where everything else was cut. So I think my political opponent is throwing out wild numbers about tax increases, and I'm more interested in keeping people safe. But think about it. Mothers that have lost their sons and daughters in violent crime are telling us that we need to take better care for each other and create social conditions so people are not in crisis, so they have a home. And that's the best way to deal with violence, deal with the root cause of it. You hear everyone saying you can't police out of the crisis. And I think that's a good way to listen to people that have lost their loved ones. And that's who I'm listening to.
Okay. Olivia, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. And once again, Election Day is on June 26th, next Monday. And coming up in half an hour's time, Anthony Furey will be joining us here as well for another one-on-one interview. Again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tammie.
All right.